Jammer Lammy, and by extension the Parappa the Rapper games, take place in a world where 2D paper models of cartoon animal characters live in a 3D world, and needless to say, it can get pretty hectic and bizarre with all of the elements combined. The paper aesthetic was the visual gimmick of the series, as Parappa is literally translated as paper thin, and would even go on to inspire the likes of the Paper Mario series, where it would further refine and take many creative liberties with the world and characters quite literally being paper. But focusing on these games for the moment, from a technical standpoint, aside from adhering to graphical limitations of the PlayStation 1 or just to look cute, I find that the paper aesthetic's greatest strength is in how it preserves the cartoony art of the game even through the likes of 3D. Computer-generated models of classic characters would often represent the main art style of a lot of early 3D games, both in branding and even in concept art. Even when a game did have very polished promotional 2D art for the characters, it would really exist as an interpretation of the actual polygonal models seen in-game, with the characters of Parappa and Lammy being hand-drawn cartoons by the likes of American artist Rodney Greenblat, whose visual style became popular in Japan. Keeping them as 2D models going about in a 3D environment allows for a consistent look for character art both in concept and in execution, so you don't have to worry about things like the depth or proportions of a character like Parappa, because from face and back value his look is kept the way it is. And considering how dated a lot of early 3D models for characters look, now that we recognize them with a more refined art style, taking this approach gives the artistry of the game a timeless appeal that can always be recognized and preserved, which definitely shows with the likes of the remaster of Parappa the Rapper. However, I want to focus more of my attention on Jammer Lammy because I feel it uses the paper aesthetic to a more creative advantage, both in cutscene and in gameplay. The cutscenes in Parappa were cute, but were ultimately pretty slow burning and led to a lot of awkward movement and pacing to whatever was going on. Jammer Lammy, on the other hand, makes up for it by having action and speed to just about everything. The game is roughly 30 minutes for Lammy's playthrough alone, with cutscenes making up the bulk of that runtime, which definitely shows as these are some of the most impressive FMV cutscenes on the system. Not only is movement constant throughout every second of this adventure, but it also comes in varying intervals of speed and with much more cinematography. The scene with Lammy rummaging through her room and all of this match action editing is put in to show the craziness of what she's doing in less than a minute comes to mind of how effective it is. Also, all of those freak-out moments when Lammy checks the time are short, but are nothing short of awesome. Actually, what I find most amusing about the cutscenes is how much blatant 3D CG is colliding with the paper world, even some objects straight out of Photoshop. Although in here, instead of being distracting or out of place, they blend with the action pretty well, because they're only used in those instances where you're expecting pure insanity and every set piece is like a blur. It only took me until now to realize that Lammy's shoes are modeled in 3D, but considering how much she's running in the game, it almost blends itself into giving the illusion of pure animation. It's that impressive. Lammy has a surprising amount of cutscenes crammed into it. Even the Parappa campaign has its own unique yet nowhere near as elaborate cutscenes, and these short Masan cutscenes occur once you beat the game, though considering how compressed a lot of them look, it really makes me wonder just how much content they were able to fit into one disc. In terms of what occurs in gameplay, while the characters and worlds certainly aren't 3D polygonal beasts, they still function and move like 3D models and have their own kind of mechanics. Motion capture was used for the movements of a lot of characters, and it's really interesting to see how models like these make unique poses and realistic gestures by contorting their paper proportions. Whether it be the way that Lammy does a lot of her guitar poses with exaggerated yet recognizable postures to them, or little things like how Teriyaki Yoko twists her body and leg around to give the impression of posing. It makes for some really subtle yet effective 3D animating. The game is inherently in a polygonal 3D environment, but a lot of set pieces almost resemble the likes of papercraft or dioramas. The inside of Captain Fuss and Pepper's plane is made up of a lot of squares and rectangles that make up cartoony drawings of a plane's interface, but all combine together to form the cockpit of the plane itself. The plane alone is 3D, but the way it's animated resembles the paper modeling of the rest of the objects in the game. Then of course there's the Caterpillar Babysitter stage, which is the game's most effective use of this graphical style. The idea that the whole stage takes place in this caterpillar's elongated body, that you see parts of her holding babies rotating from the background to the foreground, while the background itself is more of her body circulating the stage, is incredibly impressive for the situation. The game in general loves to warp effects, or manipulate its paper architecture to create a fully fledged and active world towards every stage. Every flat surface within the game that looks animated is its own piece of cartoon artistry, which is what makes it an incredibly charming project when you see it in motion. Early CG in a lot of full motion videos on the PlayStation 1 are always ridiculed for looking ridiculous, useless. Even a lot of modern games that use 2D silhouettes as background elements get called out for being lazy. But when a cartoon manages to make the jump to the third dimension while still preserving yet creating its own animation mechanics in that third axis, it shows just how well the paper look has aged for the likes of these games, and will continue to thrive into more semantics later on. But that's for another time. In the meantime, I'd recommend checking out more of Rodney Greenblat's super charming art and comics, which I'll link in the description. Thank you all very much for watching. I want to 3D print every single PlayStation environment and character that there is. This is Matt, who crosses the line, and this has been Aesthetic Analysis.